Hi, everybody. This is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It's Wednesday, December 19th, and I'm doing a short video to talk about the upcoming transits of Mercury conjoining with Jupiter and the Sun making a trine with Uranus. These are a couple of transits that are going to pack a punch, and they're a little subtle. I mean, just in terms of looking at a chart, pulling up a chart and looking, you could miss them. The reason being is that not everyone picks up on trines, first of all. Not everyone pays as much attention to trines. Sometimes I'm guilty of that. And also, Mercury Jupiter, it's kind of a fast-moving conjunction. You could look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's a neat conjunction. But when you see the two things happening at exactly the same time, that's what's tipping us off here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see this. All right, so you should be able to see now the wheel on the screen. And what I want to point you to is this. So here's Mercury and Jupiter coming together. The houses don't matter when you're doing a transit like this. Sometimes people ask me, do the houses matter when you're looking at this? No, because we're looking at a transit that's going to perfect in different locations in the sky all around the world. So house locations don't matter as much when you're doing mundane forecasting, unless you're doing specific sort of traditional techniques. At day to day, you can just look at the planets. You don't have to look at houses. So, but you'll see there's Mercury and Jupiter getting together in the next couple of days, and there's the Sun moving into a trine with Uranus. So why is that a big deal? Well, first of all, notice the pattern. There's a trine between the Sun and Uranus. Trines are of the nature of Jupiter. Sun is in Jupiter's sign. Mercury is conjoining with Jupiter. Where is Jupiter? It's home fire sign. Where is Uranus? A fire sign. So you've got a lot of Jupiter and you've got a lot of fire coming through. What does that mean in general? Well, in the most general sense, that means expansion, augmentation, growth, and a strong sense of things being animate, things kind of being lit up or charged. You get the feeling of intensity and willfulness with fire. You also have the feeling of discovery, invention, bigness of thought and mind, big communication. You get pronounced, more pronounced or bold kind of proclamations. And when you're chatting with people, the conversation can get big and dramatic and exciting and fiery and willful. With so much fire, remember that fire is not like water or air, where there's an easier time sort of adapting to the other. Earth and fire can sometimes struggle a little bit in the dryness department, which can get a little bit more rigid and sort of separative. And so the fiery tendency in the sky right now, while this looks like a really expansive moment, could also be a little bit of a willful moment. It's a good time to kind of take a charge, like in battle, like charging into battle. It's a good moment for there to be awakening that helps you to individuate, meaning it's related to personal growth and becoming more of what you feel you essentially are, or something like that. And of course, this usually will circulate around things like our jobs, our relationships, it's stuff like that. But so in the mundane sense, you could have important conversations with people taking positions intellectually or philosophically that are very sort of heated and passionate and defiant, maybe also original and inventive. That's kind of Uranus energy that's coming in. But don't forget, Uranus in a Mars-ruled sign, Sun still fading from a square to Mars. It's more willful. It's more impassioned right now. It has a kind of crusading, visionary, missionary in a foreign field kind of feeling. I think it's from a Coldplay song. Mercury Jupiter can be exaggerated and grandiose, can be verbose and inflated. Sun Uranus can similarly be combative and defiant and unyielding and stubborn in a not so great way. It's a great time, again, if there's a stand to be taken, that you take a stand. On the other hand, if you're going to go against the grain and you are afraid of burning bridges, be careful, because you very well could burn some bridges right now if you go too hard and too fast and being too individualistic and too proud or too enamored of your own ideas or opinions. Something that it's not always bad, by the way, to be confident, to have a belief in things. I literally heard someone the other day and I've said this before or something similar to it in previous talks, but someone once got mad at me because I was talking about God. And they said, well, you shouldn't be talking about God because not everybody believes in God. And I was kind of shocked a little bit because I said, well, I could understand if someone was talking about God in a way that was maybe, really punitive and harsh, or, condescending and kind of like you're going to hell or something, like I get it. Sometimes people talk about God and it's definitely not a God that I want to know, or I could see why other people would want to know. But to outlaw people from talking about things that we have differing beliefs or ideas about is a really bad idea. The freedom of speech that we live with should be able to tolerate differences of opinion, differences of belief. If someone wants to talk about God, or if someone wants to talk about being an atheist, or if someone wants to talk about whatever they want to talk about, for the most part, we shouldn't immediately get offended if it's something that I don't have that same belief, right? That's what open-mindedness really is. At the end of the day, open-mindedness is not, well, I don't believe that idea is open-minded. Open-mindedness is really about being able to tolerate and hear and listen and consider ideas that you don't believe to be exactly as valuable as your own, and that goes for those of us who are liberal too. I consider myself very liberal with most things, conservative with others. I feel I'm conservative in some ways with certain kinds of astrological issues. I'm liberal with certain issues related to politics. So none of us are like one thing or another either, right? And that's another thing to be careful of during this little window of time, is remembering that even in your most heated and passionate moments, usually we're all sort of walking contradictions. We're like conservative over here, we're liberal over here. We like this, we don't like that. There's a lot of diversity within each of us, even if we feel very principled about things. And that's also the way to remember how to be open-minded, is to recognize our own internal inconsistencies and just say, okay, well, it's not like I am a perfect example of someone who 100%, all of my ducks are in a row and I live by my principles without any contradiction or, whatever. So this is a transit that it can kind of easily devolve into being rigid and in our thinking, and sometimes also mistaking being principled and firm in our convictions, right, for being open-minded, because they're not always the same thing. Sometimes, people think, well, I'm really open-minded, again, and I really believe what I believe. And I can't, or excuse me, I said that backwards. Sometimes we believe that I can't be open-minded and principled at once. I can believe in something very firmly and also be open and okay with the fact that others may not believe the same thing as me. So I think we live in a moment, the reason I'm saying this is I think we live in a moment where it's very easy. We're sort of teaching ourselves to be so easily triggered by things that we don't agree with. And I think this is something to be very careful of in the next 48 hours, because this transit, if anything negative, could be about sort of intolerance. So I hope that made some sense. Rambling through some of my ideas there. Mercury Jupiter. Ah! All right, so let's see here. We have a couple other things to consider. One is that the aha moment, the electrical insight, the getting plugged in, feeling awakened. This is very possible right now. The ability to grasp ideas or concepts that are big, new, different, original, that break the status quo, to be shaken awake by something. This is a great benefit or potential blessing of this next 48 hours. So think about putting yourself in contact with people who can awaken you. Think about taking extra time out for a spiritual practice or to learn more about something that you enjoy, because the possibility for real light bulb moments and personal breakthroughs to occur, if we put ourselves in position for them to occur, I think is pretty good right now. It's also nice that for the moment the moon is in Taurus for the rest of today. The nice supportive, stabilizing energy. But mark my words, once the moon gets into Gemini, that's when things are really going to get nice and bonkers, because it'll be in a Mercury ruled sign, it's airy, and it's going to start stimulating all of this really rapidly. So when does that happen? Because I'm not telling you, am I? All right, so you move, keep going, and here it is. It moves in about 10:30 in the morning, East Coast time, USA, tomorrow morning on Thursday, December 20th. And then it's going to stay there, right? It's going to stay there all the way up until Saturday morning, and when it enters Cancer. And as soon as it enters Cancer, we're in the winter solstice period, and we're at a full moon. So this is, like I said, the next 3-4 days, it caps off at the full moon. And that full moon is happening just as Mercury's separating from Jupiter, just as the sun has just finished its trine to Uranus and is now entering Capricorn. But these next few days are really electric and sparkly. So, like I said, if we put ourselves in with people that we like right now, with people that we find stimulating, with teachers, in subjects or learning environments, or just experiences where we can stand to learn something or grow in our awareness of ourselves or the world, there can be really sort of expansive learning opportunities. And the other thing to think about is just in terms of the suddenness and unexpectedness, the unexpected, dramatic, rapid, speedy energy of this transit is pretty unmistakable. I mean, you'll feel this kind of ignition. It feels a little bit like, to make a bad joke, it feels a little bit like, Zeus when he's manic. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of, or you could think about it as like Hermes snorting a line of cosmic cocaine, which is, I imagine, pretty crazy, but I don't know what that means. So at any rate, I do not advocate the use of drugs at all. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to turn now to a few questions from the question box. I haven't done these for a while. I've been meaning to. So I'm going to turn over to that now. First question that someone asked me is, wait a second, here it is. Linda asks, you mentioned the influence of Eastern mysticism on Plato and thereby Hellenistic astrology. Could you say more about that in the sources? Sure. Well, first of all, this is rather speculative on my part. It's not uninformed or uneducated, but it is speculative in that we have nowhere where it's clearly spelled out that Plato was directly influenced by Eastern mystics, and we don't have hard proof that Hellenistic astrologers were definitely committed to the Platonic Academy. But there's a lot of evidence that they were. It would make sense that they were, because Platonism was a big deal. And Platonic thinking, of course, shares a world of commonalities with Eastern philosophy. So I've shown these books before, but I'll show them again. These are two of my favorite books in terms of just getting a good sense of what Plato has to do with yoga, for example, which I'm very passionate about. But it's called Universe and Inner Self in Early Indian and Early Greek Thought. And I'll hold it up so you can see it. Universe and Inner Self in Early Indian and Early Greek Thought. It's edited by Richard Seaford, and you can find it on Amazon. It's by Edinburgh University Press. Edinburgh. And then the other one is called The Shape of Ancient Thought by Thomas McEvilley. I think that's how you say his name. And this is a much longer treatise on the sort of the axial age developments, like 800 to 300 BCE, and the Persian occupation of Babylon, and the specific ways in which Eastern mystics and Western mystics were in this kind of a consortium of great mystical thinking during that period of time that is blending from the East and West. So that's where that claim comes from. Thank you, Linda, for asking. I hope that helps. You can see this all over. I teach this in my courses in depth. So, it's something that you can't summarize really succinctly, but a lot of Platonic thinking shares a lot in common with Eastern Indian thinking in particular, a lot in common with Taoism too, and it's just perennial mystical ideas, right? And understanding the commonalities between those things and the way that, say, Western people thought about something similar to karma. There's lots of carryover between the two between concepts like that in the East and West. So I will be speaking at 3 different professional astrology conferences in 2019 on this topic. So stay tuned, because there'll be more for me to share at some point about this. I'm in the process of putting together a really deep, well-researched presentation on it based on these books and others. So thank you, Linda, for that question. Okay, so Jessica had a question that was basically, is it common for people to have their star sign, moon sign, and north node to be all the same sign? So by star sign, I'm guessing you mean the sun. The sun sign, moon sign, and north node to be all the same sign. I'm wondering, because according to websites, I found that's the case for me. All 3 are Pisces. Well, Jessica, that's awesome, first of all, that you have been doing research on astrology on your own. I think that means astrology's calling to a person. So I always find that encouraging, that even feeling like the sky is sort of calling to you and that you have particular questions about very specific things, this is often a sign that you're on track to study more astrology. So first of all, just congrats, because not everyone receives those kinds of questions. And I don't like to give, just trite answers. There's not just one way of answering a question like that. If the sun and moon are in the same sign, it means you were born close to a new moon. Being born under a new moon has a significance all of its own. That's a whole separate topic that I can't get into. If the north node is also in the same sign, it amplifies the issues of the new moon, whatever they might be in the chart, because the north node is associated with Jupiter and tends to augment or increase things. So it's beyond that, it's very specific to individual charts. It has to be read in context. Not all new moons mean exactly the same thing, because it depends on house. It depends on sign. You're in Pisces. Where is Jupiter in the chart? That will have a lot to say about what this new moon that you were born under means. Was it a balsamic moon? Was it just a very early new moon? Those things make a difference as well. It's not uncommon for that thing to happen, for that occurrence to happen, because every year there are new moons that congregate around one of the 2 nodes, the south node or the north node. So no, every year there's babies born when the new moons are happening around the north node. It's not the most common signature in the world, but I don't find a lot of value in talking about what's super common and what's not common, because just because something's uncommon doesn't mean a person may not live a very common life. Just because something is really common astrologically doesn't mean that someone won't live a really uncommon life. So I'm always very careful about those things as well. So Jessica, I hope that helps. Maybe we'll do a talk on the new moon in the future, but thanks for your question. All right, another question from Isabel. She wanted to know, ascendant signs can say a lot about the condition of one's body. I have read also that the ascendant sign can show up as sometimes very specific physical attributes or characteristics. Yeah, that's actually a true thing. She's asking, what does ancient astrology say about this topic? Well, yeah, that's a thing. The first house, for example, William Lilly in Christian astrology, he's a Renaissance astrologer who looks in depth at horary astrology. It's a famous textbook called Christian Astrology. And in that textbook, he looks at the ascendant sign and its ruling planet, and often uses it to talk about a person's physical appearance. And he of course gives you a list of how to do that, but he's from like London, so it's going to be like white people for the most part, right? So I don't think there's an easy way of sort of profiling someone very specifically based on the planets when you get into a more sort of globalized use of astrology in the modern era. I think that you'd have to develop something. I'm sure someone could develop something like that. But I wonder if it's not more doable when people like William Lilly were practicing astrology in a more sort of, what's the word, homogenized cultural area, like a white Western European. You'll have he had a way of assigning the signifiers to describe particular physical characteristics that were working within a more limited frame of reference of what people might look like, I think. So at any rate, but there are things that still work. For example, Sometimes Mars in the first house might mean that a person has a cut on their face, right? The first house related to the face. Or they might have a blemish that's really like a red blemish or something like that. A beauty mark, I should say. So you get the idea, though, that there are planets in the first house that could come to bear on an individual's face or their physical characteristics. Yeah, I don't think it's the most fruitful way of spending our time with astrology because, as one of my teachers, John Frawley, likes to say, like, what really it's little more than parlor magic to tell someone something that they look like based on their charts. Like, what does that really accomplish? Even within the predictive realm, it's not the most important kind of prediction, is it? So that's my answer to that one. But yeah, it's certainly a thing. It has been a thing for a long time to use the ascendant and planets in the first house to talk about a person's physical characteristics. So yeah, thanks, Isabel, for that question. That's a good one. So I'm going to pause there. I've got a lot more questions in my box, but I'll keep it short today. I hope that you're all having a nice week, and I hope that you enjoy the upcoming transits from Mercury and Jupiter and the Sun and Uranus. Okay, everyone, take care. Have a nice day.